Well, we now know who is going to be in the MLS Cup final. And I might as well just put this right now because we will now know that the Portland Timbers and Atlanta United is going to be the two teams that is going to be battling for the MLS Cup this year. And obviously, both of these games have kind of a different kind of type of game. One game looked like it was already decided before the whistle has even blown. And one game that was literally on the edge of the seat. So, let's talk about the game that was on the edge of the seat. And you know what's interesting about this playoffs? Of all the crazy game that we had in this playoffs, and believe me, there was a lot of crazy games. All of them came in the Western Conference. I mean, you look back at this playoffs, it all started with LAFC versus RSL in the Western Conference knockout round. And then you had that 4-2 kind of crazy second leg between SKC and RSL. That was in the Western Conference semifinal. And let's also not forget about my favorite game, and probably the one that will go down as one of the most memorable playoff series ever, which is the Cascadia Derby, also known as the Cascadia Instant Classic in the second leg, where Seattle and Portland was just battling each other, and it was neck and neck, and only penalties was the only way that decided who will move on into the next round and who will go out. And here we go. In the Western Conference final, it has happened again, where there's just been a crazy ending to decide who is going to be in MLS Cup. Now, obviously, despite how crazy this game was, this game will kind of leave a little bit bad taste of the mouth, the fact that Portland should have been down to 10 men after probably around the 72nd minute. Zarek Valentin probably should have been sent off in this game after I believe he made an absolute sinister challenge on Jerso Fernandez, and he was on a yellow card. And Mark Geiger did not decide to give him a yellow card, but instead give him a last warning. Now, obviously Geiger is one of the most hated referee in MLS, and it just seems like whenever Geiger is refereeing a game, he usually is afraid to show the yellow card, and that's why a lot of people always talk about how whenever Geiger shows a yellow card, it's kind of surprising, and it's not in a good way in terms of surprising. But obviously that should have been a second yellow, and you know, we don't know if that is going to affect the overall outcome of this game, but believe me, that should have been a yellow card. Like, how in the world was that not a second yellow on Valentin? I'll never know. Like, any other game or any other ref that will judge in that situation, they always said that it's a yellow card. So I understand why Sporting KC are absolutely upset, and I know they definitely have all rights to be upset about that. Although Sporting KC are not just upset about that incident. Sporting KC were upset about everything that was against them, and they even did a shade of LAFC and decided to throw garbage on the pitch, which, by the way, speaking of garbage thrown on the pitch, this also happened in the Red Bulls versus Atlanta game, where I believe they actually capture a footage of a fan sitting in the first row, and he basically, or I should say she, because it was a lady, decided to just throw a ball right, I believe, in front of, I think it was Leandro Gonzalez Perez or Tim Parker or somebody like that. Well, actually, it was definitely not Tim Parker. It was on an Atlanta player. I think it was Michael Parkhurst that was struck by that ball that was thrown from a spectator. But I just feel like this is something MLS got to do in the future. Like, this has, you know, we talk about how LAFC and their unsportsmanlike kind of way of throwing garbage on the field. This has happened so many times, and it has happened to other teams, and the league's got to do something about this. I mean, I think maybe one thing they could do is maybe put a couple of security a couple of usher near the touchline, kind of like what the Premier League is doing, where they have like the usher at the touchline watching the fans to make sure that they don't throw garbage on the field. Maybe that's something that they do. But whatever it is, they got to figure this out, because this has happened so many times this season in the playoffs, and it's absolutely unacceptable. But in terms of going back to this game, and kind of got a little bit off topic in terms of the fans' behavior in this playoffs. So basically, it looked like Sporting KC was going to run away with it. The first half, they pretty much were by far the better team. Portland was really just... I mean, I know that they were going to bunker, but they had no success whatsoever in terms of bunkering. Showery, of course, got the goal in the 20th minute, and after that, I thought Sporting KC was going to score 2 or 3 more goals. And then they also had a goal disallow after Showery basically put a looping header into the net, but unfortunately, I believe it was Aiko Opara obstructing the view of Jeff Antonella, which was definitely the correct call, because there was definitely contact between Opara and Antonella. And you would think that Sporting KC would just run away with this, but it was only at 1-0 at halftime. Sporting KC were not very clinical whatsoever in this game, especially in the first half. And the Timbers, you got to give credit to the Timbers, and probably not just give credit to Sebastian Blanco and Valeri, who, these two guys is been what the Timbers is all about. Blanco, how many times this season he has been scoring some big goals for this team, and Valeri, he's been doing it for this team for so many years now. And obviously these two players got to give a lot of credit for what they did, but you also got to give a lot of credit to Gio Savarese. Whatever he said at halftime clearly put a spark on this team. This team looked so much better in the second half. Sporting KC just didn't look like the same team coming into the second half, and it wasn't really until maybe when Gerso scored that goal in the 81st minute where Sporting KC was once again dominating. But for majority part of the second half, Sporting KC was kind of shut down, and Portland, they take advantage of them shutting down Sporting KC. And I think in some way, when the Timbers were down 1-0 at halftime, maybe they believe that they can still win this. Because here's the thing I also say about the Timbers. You might concede a goal to Sporting KC, but as long as if you keep it at 1-0, you're always going to have a chance to potentially get a goal and move on into the next round, because all the Timbers need is a score, draw, or even a win, which they did in this game, to move on into the MLS Cup final. And I think that at halftime, when they had that belief, and by the way, also the Blanco goal, what a goal that was. I mean, that might be right up there as one of the best goals that we have seen in the playoffs. I mean, we've seen so many great goals this playoffs, and if we have an award, I would still give it to Damar Krylak in terms of that karate kick goal that he scored against LAFC. But this one is right up there as one of the best. I mean, he basically just completely obliterated the ball from 25 yards out on the left. You could argue maybe Sporting KC should have done a bit better in terms of closing down, but you usually do not see a lot of players score from that range. And Valeri, of course, got the second goal in the 61st minute to put a commanding 2-goal advantage over Sporting KC in terms of the aggregates and also the away goal rule. And then Sporting KC eventually did kind of wake up with Gerso scoring the goal, and from then on it was really it was anybody's game. Portland was really hanging on for dear life, and Sporting KC was really going for it. But unfortunately, they got caught out in stoppage time. And in many ways, I think this game kind of reminds me of the Sporting KC versus RSL game, where, remember how RSL, they were like 3-2 it was like 3-2 between Sporting KC and RSL, and if RSL get that third goal, then they will, of course, will move on. And RSL was so close from getting that third goal after I believe DeMar Krylak scored in the 75th minute. And then when stoppage time come, and that game, I think it also had similar amount of stoppage time as the 9 minutes that we got in this game, RSL just, they kind of stopped playing. Like, it felt like they kind of got exhausted. They kind of ran out of ideas. And then, late in the game, Sporting KC scored that fourth goal, and that, of course, was the final score of that game. This looks like a complete carbon copy of what happened in that game, where Sporting KC, you know, they got the goal. They were really pushing for it in the last 10 minutes, but as stoppage time comes, they just ran out of idea. And Valeri, of course, picked them off on the counter to basically seal this one off. And for Portland, you know, this is just unbelievable. Like, I don't think anybody in the world would say the Timbers would be going to MLS Cup this year. Like, after what we saw from them this season, and also coming into the playoffs too, everybody except maybe for a couple of Timbers fans have written them off. I even written them off when they were playing FC Dallas because, you know, I thought whoever was going to win that game is probably going to get defeated to Sporting KC because of the fact that Sporting KC is the better team. But nope, instead Timbers, of course, move on. They beat their hated rival, and now they beat Sporting KC on the road. And as for Sporting KC, I mean, in some way, I kind of want to apologize to Sporting KC for pretty much been kind of jinxing them in terms of the fact that this is a different team. But in some way, you could also say that this Sporting KC team, and I'm going to take out of that second yellow card and a potential red card on Valentine out of this equation of what I'm going to say, but I feel like they were just not clinical. Like, the reason why they did not win this game was not because of the fact that they weren't good enough, but they weren't clinical. Like, they had so many chances in the first half to potentially make it 2 or 3-0, and they just couldn't put that ball into the back of the net. And when you leave a game at 1-0, when you leave a game in the balance for the Timbers to potentially comes back, yeah, that is a dangerous thing to do. And it does not take a lot for that to come back to haunt you. And we saw that with the Blanco goal in the 52nd minute, where it just completely haunts Sporting KC back with the way that they did not put the ball into the back of the net when they had so many chances to do. But meanwhile, moving on into the Eastern Conference, and this one I probably won't spend a lot of time talking about it because it was pretty obvious what was going to happen in this game. I mean, I try my best to give Red Bulls fans some hope of the fact that, you know, so far this season, a lot of things has gone against the odds, and certainly the Portland Timbers join that list of things that are just completely against the odds, considering the fact that Sporting KC have not lost at home a lot this season. I think the only loss they have this season at home was against FC Dallas, I believe. But, you know, I thought the Red Bulls was maybe going to pull off of it. And 14 seconds into this game, it looked like that was over. I mean, Joseph Martinez threw on goal. You would think that that's done and finished, but unfortunately he missed it. But even with that miss, when you look at throughout this game for the Red Bulls, they rarely threaten Atlanta. Like, to be fair, Atlanta, they did a very good job in terms of defending. Obviously, a lot of that credit has to goes to Michael Parkhurst, Jeff Lorenovitz, and especially LGP, who I thought he was the man of the match in this game. Like, he was everywhere in this game. Every time when the Red Bulls will go on the attack and putting those ball into the box, he was always there to deal with it and intercept the ball. And the Red Bulls, they were just toothless going forward. Like, despite the fact that they had so many possession in this game, which was obvious that they were going to do that. Atlanta was pretty much just going to sit back and defend. And, you know, I would say that Atlanta did a good job on that, but it's also a combination of the fact that the Red Bulls they did not do enough going forward. And, you know, they did get one goal in the 94th minute, and this should be 4, not first. They got this one really late in the game. It was the last minute of the game from Tim Parker, but it was just too little too late for them. And if you're a Red Bulls fan, this is certainly disappointing. Not just the fact that it feels like Groundhog Day once again, where the Red Bulls failed to go to the MLS Cup despite being in the conference final, and despite the fact that they won the Supporters Shield and have the best season ever in MLS history. They will always kind of remember as another failure, kind of a season of them unable to get over the hump. And in this game, even though they were expected to not get over the hump, it was obviously an impossible task to overcome a 3-0 deficit. They just didn't show enough to even, it's almost as if they didn't even try in this game to try to overcome this 3-0 deficit. They made Atlanta almost just cakewalk themselves back to Atlanta to get ready to host MLS Cup. And as for Atlanta, this is definitely a good win for them, and certainly they would be heavy favorites now heading into MLS Cup, because they are playing at home and they are playing against a Timbers team that, in this game against Sporting KC, there's definitely some flaws in terms of this Timbers team. But then again, like I said, I don't want to just say that Atlanta has won MLS Cup, because one, we're still 7 days away from MLS Cup, so anything can happen in terms of off the field situation or maybe some injury in the training, which I hope that won't happen. And two, what if we're going to see another underdog coming into MLS Cup and completely upset the odds? I mean, we've seen that in the past before. So I don't want to just say that Atlanta has won this, even though it looked like they probably will win this and that they are heavy favorites heading into MLS Cup. But yeah, either way, guys, that is pretty much it for the review of the conference final. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these two games, and are you excited about MLS Cup? I'm certainly excited about that, despite the fact that as a Quakes fan, these two teams are probably the two teams I don't want to see in the playoffs, mainly because the Timbers is kind of our rival. I mean, for me as a Quakes fan, in my view, I don't hate the Timber as much as the Galaxy as what other Quakes fan would do. I know a lot of Quakes fans do hate the Timbers a lot. And obviously Atlanta, we know what happened when the Quakes play Atlanta this season, of how we got absolutely robbed. And I know people are going to continue to say that that was the correct call. I still don't think so. I think that clearly shouldn't have been it was a penalty, but they should have called it earlier. So there you go. That's how this MLS Cup is gonna play through next Sunday. And let me know in the comments below, what do you think of that, and also even leave some prediction below, even though it's still very early in terms of when the game is gonna kick off next week. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.